Welcome to Beyond the School Gate. For those of you who are new around here, my name is Ruth, and this podcast aims to share the varied experiences of women in leadership, to talk about what we do beyond the school gate, the good, the bad, and the funny. Karen was born and bred in New Zealand. Currently living in Melbourne, Australia, she loves a solid life plan, but has also grown comfortable with being uncomfortable. At 29, she left all her friends and family behind, a great job that she loved, and the investment property she had been renovating since the age of 23. She travelled to the other side of the world to continue to indulge her curious spirit. She has travelled across much of England into Wales and Scotland. She has gone from Western to Eastern Europe to Scandinavia and tiptoed into the North Africa and East Asia continents. She has experienced sunset camel rise, jumped out of planes and off bridges, and dived under the seas along with manta rays, scorpionfish, turtles, and sharks. Experiencing new cultures and people has broadened her mind and her outlook on life. She lived in London for 2 years, worked hard and travelled hard, and had planned to stay longer but had to leave due to Brexit. After adjusting to living in a city of more than 8 million people, coming back to New Zealand was a little bit of a culture shock and too small for her liking. So she headed to Melbourne, Australia to see if it was as great as people said it was, and she's been there for almost 4 years. She has worked for not-for-profit organisations and the government in New Zealand, England and Australia. For the last 5.5 years, she has worked with peak industry bodies representing biotechnology companies. She is currently the Communications Director and a third of her way through her MBA at the Melbourne Business School. And as if that wasn't enough, she is also volunteering as a secretary of a patient advocacy group. Please join me in welcoming Karen Parr. Hey Karen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. You're my first guest that I've done the video and the audio with. And Karen and I were just chatting before we came online about how nervous I was. This is the first recorded episode of the podcast that we've done. So thank you so much for agreeing to come on to the podcast.
A pleasure.
And I was just commenting on how long your hair's got. It looks so nice.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it is COVID here. So with the lockdowns, we couldn't really get to hairdressers. So it's just growing out. So yeah, thank you.
Suits you. I thought we could start off by just letting the listeners know a little bit about how we know each other. I think this is such a fun question because I remember my first memory of when we first met. So it'll be interesting to hear kind of how similar that is to your memory.
I remember our meeting as well very well. I had just moved to London and I started at St John's and we ended up sitting opposite each other. And I just remember this most engaging and fierce woman who was like, "Hi, I'm Ruth. I'm going to move to Australia."
Oh, that's funny.
Major goals and you in line and yeah, we're working in the same directorate. So, and I was just there on a temp contract, but yeah, it was awesome.
I remember saying to Katie, who I think you reported into at the time, like, "Oh, she's here on a temp contract, but how can we keep her? Let's see if she wants to stay. I have jobs in my team." I just remembering like you were so awesome from day one that I was like, how do we keep her here? I want to be her friend.
Well, we achieved that. Well, half of it. I stayed for 3 months, which was great.
Yes.
Yes, but the friendship has been ongoing.
That's it. And fun fact, for those of you who don't know, Karen was you were getting your visa to stay in the UK at the same time I was getting my visa to move to Australia, and then Karen ended up not staying in the UK due to Brexit, and not long after we got our visas to Australia. So I was like, oh, I'm a little bit closer to you, and yeah, what do you reckon? Canberra to Melbourne's probably how many hours drive do you reckon?
Oh, maybe 7 or 8.
Okay.
I've got no idea. I've never driven it, actually.
Yeah, no, me neither.
It's like an hour's flight, so it's not far at all.
Not far at all. Soon, one of us will. You'll either move to Canberra, or I'll move to Melbourne.
Melbourne's a great city, Ruth.
Okay, I'll tell Ahmed. Cool. And for the listeners, I did a little bit of an intro for you, and it's just wild to think how much you've squeezed in already in your life. Like, as I was reading through, kind of, because I get people to send me in a little bit about their experience and their background kind of before the podcasts, and it was just awesome to hear your experience. So many things I didn't know about you.
Oh, wow, that's good. I'm glad. I like to keep people on their toes. When I was writing it, I didn't really think anything of it. But then when I got your a couple of messages from you, I was like, oh, who's that person? They can't be me.
It's pretty awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, I've been busy. Yeah, good.
So we spoke a little bit about in the intro about you being in the biotech space. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. I didn't actually start in biotech. So I think of myself as a communication and engagement professional, or that's where I started. And when I was, so I'm sure you can tell from my accent, and maybe you've mentioned this in my my intro, but I'm a Kiwi. I'm from New Zealand, and I worked originally in more conservation and environmental science, and working as in comms and engagement there. So that means working between the community and the issue. So that could be fresh water, or it could be about animal conservation. But when I moved to London, which I wanted to live in London, they don't really have an environment. So it's a bit of a concrete jungle. So I ended up working and moving across into biotechnology. So, and from there, as you mentioned, around Brexit, so I did a couple of years in London and then came to Australia and continued on. I went to uni. I did my university degree. I started off actually studying science and arts, but I very quickly dropped science. When I started my degrees, I was like, I'll do arts for fun and then science for the job. And then, because at that stage, loads of people say, oh, transferable skills, they're not really worth anything. It's more those hard skills that you need to have and that knowledge. But yes, I quickly worked out I'm much better in those transferable skills. And so I dropped my science and did a double major. And then, keep going.
That's wild. So it sounds a little bit from what you were saying that it wasn't necessarily that intentional to be in the biotech space, but in the actual role that you're in, would you say that was an intentional role, but you're just in a different sector to what you thought?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's kind of a beautiful merging of that science and art. So whilst I didn't originally intend for that to happen, it's worked out wonderfully. And also I guess whilst it's not necessarily where I intended to go, it's also where the opportunities were, and you can make anything out of an opportunity, or I think that, and it's about how you grow into the role, and you can make it your own, so it works for the business as well as for you. So whilst roles aren't, and particularly even within this organization, I've grown through a couple of different areas, and so what I started off doing here, it's not, I stepped into it thinking this is an amazing dream job, and then I've grown even further. So, I just keep pushing the boundaries.
I love it. And what is it in particular about the comms element of your role that you enjoy the most?
I love the challenge. Like so my role is really broad, and so you never know what you're going to be thrown. My role is working with scientists and with companies who are doing this most incredible, groundbreaking R&D, research and development, and I get to tell their stories, or to help them tell their stories, or I get to help look at policies that is going to help support their companies to grow and to commercialize these technologies. And so I might walk into work one day and I'm writing a media release, or I'm writing speaking notes, or I'm editing a web page, or I'm writing a policy submission. And, it's so diverse, and you're saying the same kind of messages across all these different platforms, but you just get to meet so many incredible people and apply your skills in so many different ways.
That's awesome. So also, for those of you who don't know, those of you who know me, you probably, whether you know Karen or not, you've probably heard me talk about Karen. And we normally have our chats on some of our walks and stuff. And we talk about work stuff and some challenges and some updates and things. And you always manage to help me think about things in a different way. And it's that, when you know something, or you think something, or you feel something, but you don't necessarily have the words to articulate what that is. And you're always really good at being able to help me step through that to make sense of what I'm thinking and feeling, and then to help me pull on the right language. And I speak to the comms people at my work, and I'm blown away by the work that you guys do, because sometimes it feels like you can't please all the people all the time as well with tough messages. So how do you work through that type of stuff? Is that something that kind of comes to your mind frequently in regards to the different audiences that you might have?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And audiences should be one of your first questions as well. So, and it's so tough, because even one set of audience can interpret your words in really different ways. And so I think it's about, the way that I approach it is knowing who is your audience and what are you trying to say to them, and then you write it all down, or you develop whatever is the content, and then you have to put on your different hats. So if I was this kind of stakeholder, how would I interpret that? If I was this kind of stakeholder, how would I interpret it? Once you have been in your sector for a while, you tend to get to know the trigger words. So so for example, back in the day, I worked in freshwater management, and I was helping councils to implement policy, but we were talking about soil, and so I was working with them, and so soil seems like a really fine word. What about the word dirt? So dirt and soil, that can be changed, but actually if you're talking to a farmer, you can't use the word dirt, you have to use the word soil. So because soil grows things, right? It's got nutritional value. So but understanding, that's just a really loose example, but knowing who you're talking to and what those trigger words are is really important. And then I think it's about keeping it as tight and clean as you can, so that there's as little wiggle room as possible for misunderstanding.
So thinking about you as a woman in leadership, thinking about you as a woman in the workplace, what do you consider to be your key values, and how do they drive what you do?
Yeah, it's interesting that you said just before about our walks, because I think that that's what you really bring to the table, is that you really make me self-reflect on my values, because it's something that I really take for granted, and I just I go with them. And you really obviously you've got all of your background really helps support those conversations as well, but I love that about you, so thank you. But to answer your question, I found the question really hard, because I don't think about this sort of thing all the time, but I would say respect is a really big thing for me. Pride in your work as well. I have I have high standards, and I expect that out of other people as well. I want to be proud of the work that we create, and I think willingness as well. So that growth mindset, and that willingness to just go in and give it a go. And like the screensaver on my phone is courage is contagious, and so it's about pushing your boundaries and just going for it, being willing to learn something new. The best things that I've learned have been when I've been thrown in the deep end, and you flounder around a little bit, but you get there in the end, and there's a big curve, and you feel so much more proud of what you've done, and it feels so much more successful, because you didn't think you'd be able to get there, but you have.
And I think you're right. I think values is such a I think they're either front of mind, or they can you just live them, right? And you don't necessarily think about them. We did an exercise at work recently where I got all my direct reports to do an activity about their values. And we also used Strength Finder, where we did an activity about our individual strengths. So doing that, I now understand a little bit more as to why people do what they do, because they're coming from a specific value set, and how they do what they do is through their strengths, which could be completely different to mine, or be perceived in a completely different way to what it's intended. And I think once you kind of know people's drivers and their values, I think it's so easy to understand where they're coming from and to work alongside people.
100%. I've done the Strengths Finder before too, and I found it invaluable. But what I found invaluable was not necessarily knowing about myself, but it was that second half of the book where it was talking about how do you manage those strengths and those people. And it revolutionized a couple of relationships for me. So
Yeah, there was somebody I had lunch with. She's a CEO in the sector in Canberra. She's pretty awesome. You know, when you meet somebody and you really fangirl, and I reached out to her on LinkedIn just saying, hey, your posts are really awesome. Canberra's a small place. Hopefully your paths will cross soon. And she messaged me back and she was like, well, let's make them pass. Let's meet for coffee. So I was like, okay. And every time I see her, I'm like fangirling, because she's pretty phenomenal. I'm plucking up the courage to ask her to be on the podcast soon, but not yet. I'm not quite there yet. And she was telling me about
acting as a teaser here, Ruth.
Yeah, exactly. She was telling me about something similar to Strength Finder. I need to message her and ask her exactly what it is, but she's saying that you can spend some time on some things that really drain your energy, and some things like you should work to your strengths, but also there's some tasks that you do that drain your energy. And if you're spending time during the day doing those specific tasks, you should try and have a quiet day for the rest of the day, because it really drains you. Where somebody else, the thing that drains you might be the thing that gives them energy. So she was saying she's like, for her, writing tenders, for example, might be a drain. Like that drains all her energy. But somebody who reports into her loves that and gets their energy from that. So she writes the bullet points, and then that person builds it up, and she goes out and does the public speaking, and the other person does the leg work and the hard carrying with the writing of the tender. But it worked really well because they're aware of their strengths and what drains them and their values, and it just works really well. I think in the workplace, it's so important to connect with people on different levels, isn't it? Strengths and values, and you look at them holistically then, and not just this person who works in this department or this person who does this job. You really understand them a little bit more as well.
Absolutely. It's about growing the flowers and not the new branches, right? So if you think about it like a plant. Yeah.
Oh, I love
for sure. I think again, thank you, internet. That is not mine. I think that you nailed it there as well, about having working to your strengths and understanding each other in a team, and realizing it's not just about outputs. It's around the growth opportunities and what brings you joy. And if you bring joy and fun into the activities that you're doing, then I mean, obviously work can't be like all only things that you love to do. There's going to be the challenging things as well, but if you can work to each other's strengths and get the job done, then it's so much more motivating.
I spoke a little bit about somebody that I admire, and I admire her strength and her leadership style. So who do you look to and admire their leadership style? And what is it about them that you particularly admire?
Well, I have a habit of picking up people along my life. So I don't think it has to be only work. I think it can, I mean, they're a wonderful group, but I think you can look at all areas of your life. So I have a really strong family, and I really admire that. And so my aunts, my uncles, my parents, they've shown me about the power of a partnership. And I think that you can take those kind of lessons and you can apply them into your work and into your leadership as well. So, you've got to, particularly with science, you've got to collaborate to get things done. And those partnerships are really important. So those are really important leaders to me. There's somebody in my life who I met when I was 14, and we actually both got puppies at the same time. And we ended up going to puppy school together, and our dogs really bonded. So we went out for dog walks together. And anyway, anyway, she is phenomenal as well, to use your wonderful word. And she started her own property management business. She built up her portfolio, and she's semi-retired by the time she was 40. So she's amazing. So, people like that, super brave, incredible. And she puts all of her, I really admired how she really lives her values as well. So she's really into sustainability, and so she puts that into all of her business ventures. And so I just think that's really cool to live your values, and you can do any kind of business and put your values into it. So she's pretty cool.
That's
in
amazing.
A work sense, I think. Yeah, really. Yeah. In a more of a work sense, I've been so fortunate in jobs that I've been able to be working with CEOs and managing directors and things from SMEs all the way through to big global companies. And so I've been around a leaders, like in terms of a hierarchy sense of a leader, I've been around a lot of them, which has been amazing to be able to watch and to see. I think for all of them, they, in whatever sense that you have as a leader, it's about having trust. And that's what I admire about them. You can build the trust, you've got that respect, you can have those frank and honest conversations, and that really drives the work. And yeah, I think trust to me is really at the bottom of a relationship anyway.
And I think sometimes along the way, when you are around a number of different leaders in the context that you explained, you see the things that you really admire, and you also see the things that you don't admire and the things that you don't want to do.
When I was thinking about this, coming onto this podcast and kind of about my journey here, I was thinking about how when I was a kid, I was always told you can be whatever you want to be, which now as an adult, I recognize as quite an empowering message. But at the time, it was normal. And, I grew up in New Zealand where, we gave women the vote. We were the first ones in the world. We had, when
Really?
I was growing up
through
my formative years. Yes.
Wow.
When I was growing up in my formative years, we had a female prime minister. We do now again as well. And so, we always had those, or I always had those female leaders, which was wonderful. But I guess for me, going through communications, you don't typically see CEOs or people at the top with a communications background. And so I've always thought, like, if I wanted to get there, then, you could be there. But now I've got a CEO who does have a comms background, and it's so incredible for me as well, because, to know something versus to see it is really different. And it's that whole you can be what you can see kind of mantra as well. It's powerful.
Also, we have, on paper, it wouldn't make sense for us to be friends, right? Like, we've got such different backgrounds and upbringings. Shameless plug here. Go to one of my earlier episodes about 17 and pregnant, and you'll hear a little bit more about kind of my background and my upbringing. Completely different. And I think it can show two different upbringings, two different backgrounds, but with a similar vision. And it's like we got the same vision and goals in regards to what the legacy we want to leave in the world in different sectors, but the same type of, we want to leave a specific legacy. But our motivations are just from completely different places, right? And I kind of love that. You know what you said about collecting people along the way? I love that, because I feel like I'm one of those people you've collected along your travels. And in like our normal world, like our paths never would have crossed. Like, thank God for St. John Ambulance. So do you think, in regards to like your leadership style, do you think you crafted it? Do you think it's just the way you are? Do you think it's an amalgamation of like your background, your experiences, your exposure? Like, how would you describe how you arrived at your leadership style, like in a nutshell?
I think to start with, it was definitely just leaning into my authentic self. As I mentioned before, I was in earlier in my career, I was in a role where I had to influence people who, I was around CEOs and MDs and things who I wasn't at that level at all. And so I had to go in and try and influence them. And so, had to learn these leadership skills that would enable that to happen without having the I guess the piece of paper behind you, or the letters behind you, or the title. And so to begin with, it was very much just me being me. But I think as I've grown, that's definitely changed. I've realized that there are many different leadership styles, and different circumstances call for different times. Typically, I try and go into that coaching stage, but there's times where you kind of have to go into more of the visionary, or you have to go into the commanding, or it depends on the situation. I think of myself as like being in a spider web, and so I'm connecting all the little strands together and making a picture, and that's always how I think of it, like my role. So that's basically what you're doing now.
Connecting the dots. Okay, so changing tact a little bit. I read a stat. I am a little bit of a data geek. I love to use data to kind of help inform practice and help develop services. Like, my background is very operational service delivery, client services. Pretty much done that since the age of 18 in youth and community space. So I do like data to help inform practice, and data to kind of throw assumptions out there and see kind of where they land. So I read a stat the other day that said 85% of female leaders have struggled at times with imposter syndrome. So a question: do you ever struggle from imposter syndrome? And if you do you have any ideas to kind of where it came from?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I am often told by my friends that I talk with confidence, and but then they might call me on it, and there is not always any confidence to back that. And I don't know where it comes from. I think it's just you talk a good game, right? Like, it's just me. Yeah, especially given that, like, as I said before, like, I was told I can be anything I want to be. So I shouldn't have imposter syndrome, because I should think that I can do it. But no, there's been many times in my career, in my life, where I say, okay, I want this and I want this and I want this, and then somebody goes, okay, here you go, and I go, oh no, I can't do that. What do you mean you're giving it to me?
Possibly.
Yeah, exactly. So I think just feel the fear and do it anyway. That's my advice.
So that's how you move through it.
Totally, absolutely. Yeah, just I guess it goes back into that whole willingness thing, right? So you have to be willing to jump in and make a mistake, and if you've fostered that the respect and the trust and all of that, then, and you have a good and I mean, to be fair, I've had pretty good relationships with my managers across the years, and so I've built that opportunity to make mistakes, and to be vulnerable in that way. And so if you've got that, just jump in, do it, give it a shot.
That's it, right?
Obviously, if they've given you the opportunity, they obviously think that you show potential. So
I do feel like I have less imposter syndrome, and I think it's not because I know more necessarily. I think it's just because I'm more comfortable with saying I don't know.
Like, I've had this happen in my career as well, is I have gone for opportunities and they've said no, and that's fine, but they say, but now we know that you're keen on it, so like, we'll help you grow to get there. And so if you don't go for it, you don't give it a shot, then how are they going to know? And if they do give you the shot, then obviously you show enough potential to keep it going forward. But also, I have a bit of a relentless drive. So I'm a people pleaser, which together is not a great combination for balance in life. So I will keep going and I will keep trying until I get it right. So, if you want something bad enough, then you can go and get it.
And that's another thing I didn't know about you till probably a few months ago, when you had said you were a people pleaser. I was like, really? And I would never have picked up on that. Like, I probably wouldn't have, I would have used the term perfectionist. Like, if you said I'm a perfectionist, I would have been like, yeah, I can see that. So the fact that it was coming from a different way, I was like, oh, that's interesting. No judgment. It was just I hadn't kind of seen that side. So I just thought it was interesting.
How would you say that they're different?
I don't know. I think in my very simple mind, one is about you and one is about other people. So I always thought your drive to do what you do and to be where you are and to achieve what you've achieved has come from a place of you wanted to do it for you. Does that make sense? As opposed to, in my mind, people pleasing is more about you're doing it to make those people happy, but is it what you want to do? Where I've always felt a sense of you've always wanted to do it because that's what you've wanted to do, if that makes sense. But
yeah,
it could be a mixture of both, though, couldn't there, as well? Like,
yeah, absolutely. And sometimes if you want to get where you want to go, you have to keep everybody else happy until you can get there. So
yes, that's very true.
I think it's pretty, yeah. Look, I think both as well. And I've done the very first personality test that I did in work, I came out as, I can't even remember which one it was called, but it came out as a perfectionist, which really made me laugh because I was like, of course I am.
So thinking about, we've done a little bit of reflection on your career and where you are now, and what your drivers are, what motivates you and what your values are. If you were to look 5 years from now, where do you see yourself?
Oh, wow. I'm a bit of a geek in that I always have a life plan going on. So I've always got a 1 year, a 3 year, 5 year, 10 year plan. But they always evolve and grow. So every year I rewrite them. And I have a look, and there's that. This is a very long-winded way to answer your question, Ruth. They, how they say that you think you can achieve more than you really can in 1 year, but you don't think you can achieve that much in 5 or 10 years. That is very true about my plans as well. So, but in 5 years' time, I should have finished off my MBA by then. So I'm about a third of the way through now, which is very exciting. So that is good. I purchased a property, co-purchased a property, and with the intention that we were going to subdivide and to build more on there because the land's big enough. So we've just started doing that. So as in the process. So that's very exciting. So hopefully that will have started, that will have completed, and we'll have stable tenants in there. I would love to be traveling again. That would be pretty exciting. I love adventure, so I would love to get back out, as I'm sure half the world would. And in terms of work, the plan is to be the CEO. So that's where I'm headed, which is a big call, I know, but this is my imposter syndrome screaming at me at the moment.
No,
but that is the goal. So that's what I'm working towards.
And why not, right? Like your mum said, you can be anything you want to be. And why not? If not you, it has to be somebody else. So why not you?
Absolutely.
What would you say, what do you consider to be the biggest hurdles to you get into where you want to be in the next 5 years? And what tools do you have in your toolbox that you can pull on to help you get there?
I don't like the word hurdles. Can we say
substitute it
opportunities for growth?
Oh yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Okay. So my opportunities are, look, I think having moved countries twice now, what has become, I mean, it seems so obvious, but is really when you live it, you realize how much assumed knowledge there is. So for me, I think what I need to grow and what I need to learn is things like the culture, politics, all of that kind of history that people just assume that context. They'll make comments and compare things to other situations, and actually, I don't know who that Australian football player is.
Right. Oh my gosh, it happens to me all the time. They're like, oh yeah, do you remember that speech about the misogynistic man that this woman and I was like, no.
So I think that time is really important, and experience as well. So the more people you talk to, the more hot gaps you'll be able to fill in those references. But I think as well, more generally for work, this is probably there are some knowledge gaps. Obviously, everybody has knowledge gaps, and so doing the MBA is really helpful for that. So in terms of a toolbox, it would be time, it would be experience and qualifications. I think that'll get me there.
Yeah, okay. So you're saying in the next 5 years?
That's the plan.
Wow, that's more than achievable. I'm going to write this day down in my diary, and in 5 years' time, I'm going to get back on the podcast, and I'll be asking you for a job.
No, you'll be a award-winning journalist by then, Ruth, with your podcast.
Oh, imagine. Gosh. What do you enjoy the most about what you do and why?
I mean, it's definitely the challenge that I love. I get to work with people who are doing world-leading research and development. It's incredible. They work on medical technologies that will improve or heal people, and I get to tell their stories, and that's amazing to me. I think, and there's always challenges. There's always, in any organization, that there's stakeholder challenges, and trying to get people to come onto the same page and to have a united vision for the broader sector. So I work in an industry organization, so I kind of overlook the whole sector rather than being company by company. So I get to transcend that and tell the broader story. I get to tell it from a state base, from a national base. We get to talk internationally about how amazing Australian is. It's pretty cool. I guess it's the reach as well. So, in terms of communications, you get to have a really you have a lot of metrics available to you, and so you can see how many people are reading your articles, and you can see how many placement stories you get placed. But then I get to marry that with policy as well, and so then you've got the influence elements as well, and so and to get everybody to work together and rowing in the same direction. It's pretty cool.
I was going to say, I can see your face light up as you talk about it. Like I can see the passion just coming out through the screen. It's pretty awesome. Like, you're really fortunate to be doing a job that you absolutely adore.
100%. And I have friends who haven't quite found that passion yet, and it's really hard to find. And I kind of feel like I stumbled into it, but it's very much I was leaning into those strengths, just as we were talking about before. And I think I learned that lesson very fortunate, but I learned it so early when I was at uni, and I was trying to do science and arts, and I realized, well, actually, I suck at science. I love it, but I'm not good at it. So lean into the strengths, go into the arts, and you can still work in science without being a scientist.
So thinking about what you enjoy outside of work, what do you enjoy doing the most, and what are your passions outside of work?
Look, there's work and study take up a lot of my time at the moment, but when I'm not doing that, I really like the water. So I love going scuba diving. It's been a long time since I've done it, but I love getting in. I love swimming. I love the beach. I love to travel, as I said, so I'm really looking forward to that. I'm actually currently in New Zealand, so I'm really fortunate in that I have finally been able to move my the borders have come down after 16 months, and so I've been able to get back here so to see friends and family, so that is very fortunate. So I moved my work from home station, and I'm here, so I'm planning to do a little bit of adventure and travel here as well. So
how long are you going to be there for?
That's a great question, Ruth. I haven't actually booked my return ticket yet, but I plan about work knows, don't worry. I plan around
exposed. Sorry, how long was that?
6 weeks.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's nice. Oh, I bet your parents are so happy.
Yes, it's lovely. It's nice to have all the animals around. They live on in rural Bay of Plenty, and so currently it is beautifully green right in front of me. I've got a beautiful vista, and in Melbourne I live in surrounded by apartments and in a concrete jungle again. So it's nice to be back.
If you could only tell your former self, your younger self, one thing, what would it be?
I would say just keep saying yes, which I mean, as when I say before that I'm a people pleaser, so I do say yes, I recognize that. But I think that, I wouldn't have got any of the opportunities or as many of the opportunities. So, for example, when I maybe about 10 years ago, I helped. So the friend who was in property, she was also happened to be running a national conference, and she put a call out for volunteers to help out. And she was a mate of mine. So I said, of course, like, I'm happy to help you with whatever you need. One of those times again where you just throw your hat in and you jump in, even though I've never done this, but if you need a pair of hands, I'll help you. And so I did that, and that gave me an into a job. So I had 2 jobs for a while, and so I had my main career job, and then on the side I was being an administrator, for an association. When I came to London, I wouldn't have landed the job in the life sciences if I hadn't had that experience already in a membership association. And so whilst I had worked in science, I hadn't worked in, they wanted somebody specifically who had worked with members. And so then I got my foot in the door there. And so, you don't just keep saying yes. You never know where that experience, always find the joy within it as well. But you never know how paths are going to cross.
I thought it would be quite nice at the end of each podcast to ask the guests to share something about themselves that most people don't know.
Most people don't know that my first job was in a zoo. So I worked in the corporate area, but again, it was about saying yes. So I worked in the entranceway, I worked in the shop, I ran sleepovers, so I slept overnight at the zoo. I was a volunteer. Did I say I ran events? I don't know if I said that. So I just basically kind of helped out in every which way. I helped out with marketing. Basically, if anybody needed a hand, I was there to help them. So that was pretty cool. It meant some pretty cool experiences along the way. So, I've patted baby cheetahs. I've fed red pandas. We've done medical training with the tigers and the lions. So it was pretty cool. Came with some perks, which was nice.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been so much fun.
For me as well. Thank you for having me. You're my first interviewer.
Yay! Well, hopefully I'll pass the test. We'll talk once I stop pressing record on you can give me a score out of 10. I heard you got high standards.
Yeah, sure. And then I'll come back again in 5 years' time, right?
Yes, 100%. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and I shall speak to you soon.
Thanks, Ruth. Bye.